I have with us Stuart Youngner. Time to put the technology away. He is the chairman of our department and the Susan B. Watson Professor and chair of the Bioethics Department. He does a lot of international research and teaching and says he loves technology, although rates himself as a B for proficiency. Professor Nicole Deming is an assistant professor in our department. She is director of the undergraduate studies in our department. She has degrees in bioethics and law, joined our faculty in 2009, and is very interested in international programs offered by our department and has been very aggressive in expanding those. She has led a group of students to Spain this past spring and will be taking students to India this summer, and is currently working on developing a course with Australia and how to incorporate new technology to enhance our curriculum. And Dr. Gopal Yadavalli is an assistant internist and specialist in infectious diseases and HIV medicine. He is an associate program director and the director of the International Health Track for International Medicine at University Hospital's Case Medical Center. He maintains educational research collaborations with academic institutions and non-governmental organizations in southern India. He's developed a curricula and supervised field experience for medical students and residents in Hyderabad and Pondicherry. Did I pronounce that correctly? So about 5 years ago in the Department of Bioethics, Dr. Youngner had the great idea to hire me and start doing international work. So we began to develop short-term study abroad intensive experiences. And we began to realize that students from other universities were very interested in participating in these. One of the issues we had to overcome, though, was how they would participate in our pre- and post-trip classes that we offer. So we came to the Media Vision people and Wendy Shapiro and met with them and talked about how we could do this. And we started out with simply having them record our pre- and post-trip classes, having those posted on the Media Vision site so students from CASE that had to miss those sessions and students from other universities could get online, watch those lectures, and then be a part of the class when we arrived in country. Dr. Yadavalli came to us a couple years ago interested in expanding with us a program in India. And Professor Deming, when she arrived, said, I want to do something in India. The two of them began collaborating and expanding how we use technology in our department for their course in India. So at that point, I will hand it off to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle. I will. What I'll do is talk about what I've been doing in the medical school, and then and I'll let Nicole talk about where we're going to go with the bioethics part of that. So I've been working in India for about 4 years. My area of interest is HIV/AIDS, although I'm trained in all infectious diseases. And as Michelle mentioned, I work very closely with the Department of Internal Medicine at university hospitals. And I help to run the residency program there. So I have a lot of contact with medical students and residents. And because of my interest in global health and because of my work that I was starting to do in India, I thought it would be very useful and of interest to our residents to have a field experience there, to really immerse them in global health and help them to understand a few things: how medicine is practiced in resource-limited settings, what the diseases are in tropical areas that most people in the world have to deal with that we don't see here in Cleveland. I also wanted them to understand the intersection of social issues, cultural issues, religious issues, and economic issues, and how they determine health outcomes. And the final part of it was I wanted to inspire people to do careers in global health. And for each of these objectives, we have used technology in, I think, a little bit different ways. So let me describe the curriculum for you first, and then describe how we've been slowly infusing technology into that. So we have a 1-month experience that we do in southern India. The experience is really almost entirely observation. We don't go there to take care of patients. We don't go there to provide medical care. There's a number of different reasons why we don't do that. First of all, the diseases are not diseases that my people are trained in, and that's the big reason why we're going there. Also, there's a language barrier. There are legal issues of taking care of patients in India. India is very bureaucratic. And so they're not interested in us taking care of their patients, and I'm not interested in setting my medical students and residents loose under those circumstances. But I think there's a lot of learning to be done, really in both directions. So since the goal of my efforts in this regard is education, my use of technology has to do with, really has to do with preparing people for the experience and then kind of assessing how they're responding to the experience and evaluating my program in general. So the way it's evolved over the past 4 years is we have a series of preparatory lectures that we put the medical students and residents through. And this has kind of become more and more formal every year, but I have a curriculum that exposes them to the culture, talks about diseases, talks about preparation for international electives. And what we've done this year is using media vision, we've videotaped these lectures. And this is kind of our first real use of technology in this regard, in that each lecture is videotaped. We have medical residents, there's 9 who are going to go on the trip this year. Because they have inpatient responsibilities, at the most I can get 50% attendance at the lectures. So the use of the videotape has become really, really important as the program grows. My ultimate goal here is to do perhaps podcasts or video podcasts. This is what I was thinking before I came here to the conference today, but now that I've come to the conference, I realize that there's really, we're just scratching the surface on what we can do. But so far, for the preparatory part of the program, we've just been videotaping the lectures. Those are available online to the students and to the residents, and they can watch and rewatch them and prepare for the field experience. The field experience, let me just describe that to you. It's a 3-week experience. We spend 1 week at a non-governmental organization where they see leprosy, TB, and HIV. These are stigmatizing illnesses. There's a big social component to the week that they spend there. They understand all the factors that are in play for people acquiring these diseases and then not accessing medical care, and then ultimately issues regarding treatment and reintegration into society. So that's the goal of the first week. The second week is they spend time on the wards and ICUs of an academic medical center like university hospitals. And then the third week is kind of, they go to all kinds of different places. They see a research center, they see a fever hospital which is full of people with vaccine-preventable illnesses. So it's really quite a different experience. They go to slums, and Indian slums are, India has perfected the idea of the slum, I think. So they get to really immerse themselves in all kinds of different aspects of healthcare in India. So the big way that I assess them in 2 ways as they're going through these experiences. As I mentioned to you, I can't really assess how they're taking care of patients, but I want to know what they're thinking, how they're responding to what they're seeing, how they're integrating the cultural stuff and the social stuff with the medical stuff. So every evening over dinner, we talk about the day's experiences. And that's one level of feedback that I get about how their experience was. But one of the requirements to go on the elective is blogging. So we have a blog. The blog address for the most recent blog is cit3.wordpress.com. You can talk to me about it later if you're interested in checking it out. But they have to blog at least 3 times a week. And usually it's a big chore to get them to blog. But the reason we make them blog is for them to reflect in a more formal way about what it is that they're seeing. And for me to assess how they're responding to things, if they're really kind of immersing themselves, or if they're just kind of doing tourism, which is really not the goal of the elective. It also allows me to evaluate how effective my efforts are. So a lot of things come out over the dinner conversation that won't come out in the blog, but a lot of things come out in the blog when they've had time to sit down and integrate things that doesn't come out in casual conversation. So the blog is really the centerpiece of the technological centerpiece, I would say, of the experience so far. Each year, the blog has been getting a little bit better. This year, I've actually had them start to blog even before the trip. This is the first time I've had them do that. But as we've done this lecture series and as we've formalized it, I want them to think more about what it is before they actually see it. So they kind of get their preconceived notions on paper, and I can then actually tweak the course that we do, tweak the field experience based on what because each group that goes there is different in terms of experience and attitudes, and I can tweak the curriculum based on the blogging that occurs before we go. So the blog is a big thing that we do. Another thing that we've started to do is using Skype. So there is really tremendous interest in medical students in particular, and even medical residents. So I can't take everyone that's interested in the program, and my focus is really at the residency level. But there's a ton of medical student interest in this type of these types of activities, global health opportunities. So because I can't take 150 medical students with me, I tried to, last year, for the first time, I experimented with Skype. And what we did was, we gave a lecture over Skype. So I was in India, and this was to first-year medical students who are really the most open to this sort of thing. And we gave a lecture over Skype. And I talked about global health opportunities. It was linked with one of the students that's been working with me for the past couple of years. So he ran the lecture here at CASE. He ran the Skype end of it here. And I sat in our apartment. We have a shared apartment that I use for my residents in India. And I sat in the apartment with a webcam, and there was a lecture portion to what I did, and then there was an interactive portion where people could ask me questions. And I also interviewed a student that had come on the trip. This was about halfway through the trip. So he had seen a lot of different things. He had been in the audience's shoes just the previous year. So he had a lot to offer them. And so they had questions for me about some operational things about how to set up an international elective and what kinds of experiences they could expect if they came with me. But then they had a lot of questions for him on how the preparation was, or what kind of things they could do to better prepare themselves from a student point of view for global health experiences. So it was a nice exchange. We had some technical issues, and we had to jerry-rig a microphone and things like that. And I think we learned a lot from that experience, and we can do a lot better technologically this year. But the use of Skype was a big step for me, but I think it really enhanced the experience for people who couldn't come on the trip but knew about it, and were following along on the blog, but it allowed them to be much more interactive. So we're hoping to use Skype a lot more. So maybe I'll stop there. So we've used videotape, blogs, and Skype. That's what we've used so far.
Okay. So working with Gopal, Dr. Yadavalli, last year I observed his trip as well and said, well, this is a fantastic opportunity. We'd like to present this to undergraduates and graduate students to take them on a 3-week course down in India, and it'd be a bioethics course. So this is a little broader than the medical aspect of infectious disease, but we still focused on HIV, leprosy, and TB. So focusing on those, we bring in the cultural aspects and the social aspects, religious aspects, and say, how does this affect health? Working with undergraduates and graduate students, not only from CASE, but from other universities, and also in a summer course, has presented some unique challenges. We traditionally have a few pre-trip meetings where we get all the students together, we can talk about what's going to happen. It's an opportunity to go over kind of the details, and then also make sure that they have prepped for the content. Well, in the summer course, we're not going to have that opportunity necessarily. So we worked with the pre-recording lectures that Dr. Yadavalli has used for his residents, and then picked out the ones that would be best suited for the students in this aspect of the course. So we're combining forces, so rather than having these individuals come in several times and record for our group and then record for the residents, utilizing this to say that these can be used across the board. So that's one aspect where these students, no matter where they are, can look on MediaVision and have some preparation with the medical aspect of this, so they're not coming to this completely blind. The second one is that because these students will not have this opportunity to have an open discussion about an introduction to the topic of bioethics and what are their opinions on certain issues, we're going to work to send out an actual survey to them, and then they have to respond before we go down. And similar to how Dr. Yadavalli was looking at his residents and kind of understanding what their impressions were, and then being able to address them when they're down and alter it to tailor it to the course, we're going to do something very similar. So we have an idea through the survey that we'll send out to the students of what their current understanding is regarding the treatment of HIV and how access to health resources is different. And then what is our responsibility when we see discrepancies or issues of justice? So these are issues where we can start them to think about these things and give them a heads up, and also understand where they are before we go down to India. And the use of technology is really, I had to think of this in 3 different stages. It is the preparation, and then it is while we're doing the course, and then the after course. How to best use what aspects of technology. Because I have to admit that I look at a new technology and think it's fascinating, and it takes me a while to understand how to best utilize it, or is this really the best application at this time? That's a process, and I will try and fail on some of these applications, but I'm okay with that. But hopefully, with some help from some of the experts around CASE, there's a lot of resources. So we're continuing to work out how to best utilize this. So in the preparatory, we're using Blackboard, and one of the Blackboard sites that was most helpful as an instructor was working with a different libraries on campus and saying, we'd like to learn a little bit more about infectious disease, and India in particular. I have a background in law, so I said, I don't know all the law that would deal with India, so can you help me even a basic structure? And so we set up a Blackboard site, and anyone that had resources could actually post the materials on there rather than dealing with emailing me 42 documents, or something came across and it would get lost in my email. So I had this wonderful Blackboard site where I could sort out things for myself, and other people who had access to it could just dump the documents in there. So it was a wonderful way to actually organize that. So Blackboard, then we have the survey that we're sending the students, the pre-recording of the lectures, and then we are also want to have just a simple conference call with all the students. Since we're not going to be able to meet face-to-face, it is important to have this opportunity to at least speak with the students ahead of time, with Michelle, who's the director of our international courses, to prepare them for the logistics and have them hear my voice and see my picture, and hopefully they will be given an opportunity to ask questions that they have, so that we can reassure them that we will in fact see them at the airport in Bangalore, or we'll pick them up and be ready to go. I think that'll be good. So that's the technology that we're using to kind of prepare the students. And then during the course, I am copying Dr. Yadavalli's use of the blog, and this has several reasons. So one, it does provide a different opportunity. At the end of each day, we sit down and we'll have an opportunity to reflect on what we've seen. But again, group discussion is very different from actually having to write down your words. We would also like the students to give this out to their family and friends. I very much enjoyed going and traveling when I was in school as a student myself. And then you get back at the end of 3 months or 5 months, and people were like, well, what did you do? And after 5 months, or after even 2 weeks, it was too much to just go through everything that you had gone through. So to give this out to family and friends and students and have this resource available to them, so that they can comment on what their student or child is doing, their friend, and saying, you know, what is that like? I've heard about this. It's going to be interactive, but it also lets them follow along, which I think is going to be a nice opportunity. My mother is very excited about it. Just can't wait. And then we're also going to actually take down cameras, and we always ask the students to supply pictures that they have taken through the course with some reflection. So it is something that they use technology on a day-to-day basis, and they will capture what is important to them. So to give them an opportunity to actually share these, not only during the course of the trip, but when we come back, to have a site and say, this is the CASE India trip, link it to my faculty page, and then have a series of these, so it's almost a kind of reunion page where it can be in contact and reflection after the course has gone on. So then that takes us to after the course. We will still need to have some kind of recap and post session. I would like to have a reflection. We return in the first week of August, and then the class actually goes until the last week of August to have some time for them to submit their papers, ask some questions, but it would also give them an opportunity to have some follow-up, and then after they have returned? What are some of the most striking differences? So it is a complete understanding of not only is there a shock when you go there, but there's also a shock when you return back home. And to allow them to experience that and then share those experiences. And I also would just say that there's a work in progress. So even today, there were tons of different ideas that I have about how to incorporate the new technology into this. And it's going to take some time to say how to best do that so that it enhances the student's learning experience and isn't just a really cool technology that I think is fun. Because there is a danger, I know that with my personality, that it would just be fun and why don't we try this? Whereas I have to keep in mind, how is this going to benefit the students and the learning objectives that I set? So I'm trying to go slow and steady with this and slowly incorporate all these different technologies. But we'll see how they work.
Well, I'm going to talk about we have these international courses, and we've had probably over the last 5 years, maybe 8 or 9 countries or different universities that we've been involved with. And Michelle has been very instrumental in setting those up, and I've been sort of her partner in doing that. And a lot of that involves communicating with the people in the countries where we're doing the courses. And I just want to share with you a sort of historical perspective about communication. I first really got into this in 1992, before I was in the Department of Bioethics, because there was a conference in Cuba that I wanted to go to. I'm very interested in brain death and the definitions of death, and there was a conference there about it, and I always had wanted to go to Cuba, and so I wrote, no email, sorry. Speaking of communication. So I wrote to the director of the course. So I didn't email him, and I didn't call him, because I didn't know how to call Cuba. It's still not easy. And the mail between the United States and Cuba takes up to 6 weeks. The story is it goes to Langley first, if you send it from here, and they look at it, and then it goes to Cuban security, and they look at it, and I'm sure they let it sit around because they just want to be obstructionist to each other. But so you can imagine what the back and forth was like. You know, I mean, I said I'm interested in going, and then, 8-10 weeks later, I get a letter back. And I didn't complain about it. That's just the way it was then. And then email came in, and of course, and this is an important issue too, because when you're dealing with developing countries or countries where there are political reasons for not allowing wide access to the technology, it makes things more complicated. So there are people in Cuba who have access to email, but it's a very, very few. So I could communicate with some people, as the 90s wore on, and that made things, you can imagine how much better. Instead of 8 weeks for an exchange or 10 weeks, it was that day. And that was a remarkable change. But still, telephone calls, which are possible, are very, very expensive, $1.50 a minute. And you can't do better than that on Skype, on anything else. Go on, somebody says, oh, Skype, try Skype, it's so cheap. $1.50 a minute to call Cuba on Skype, because the communication is completely controlled by the United States and Cuba, and this is what they want for whatever. I mean, Cuba's making money out of it, probably AT&T is making money out of it. So there are real challenges in a place like that to communicating, but the technology has helped. They have internet that I can get access to, but they can't get the same kind of access to our internet. So again, a challenge. Now, when we work with Europe, it's a different story, or Japan. In some ways, they're more advanced than we are. So those kinds of communications are much, much easier. And before, we used to have to, if we wanted to send papers, we had to put them in the mail. Or then, boy, the really good technology, faxing them. But now it's electronic. So it's just amazing how how much easier it is, especially in a country that's technologically developed, to do things at a much more rapid pace with many more iterations of plans and so forth. What we haven't done really is video conferencing, which I think is a whole other technology which could add, I mean, you can use Skype, but video technologies, I mean, the high-end video technology is even better. And I know there's capability here. We haven't done it, but then that requires the other side to have it. And again, if you're working with developing countries, it's very unlikely that they're going to have it. So I would guess at the places where these students go, they don't have a studio where you can go in and do video conferencing. So these are things that are, I would guess, that 10 or 15 years from now, people are going to be giving talks about how primitive things were in 2001. I mean, that seems to be the pace that things are going. But it certainly makes things a lot easier, this technology. And they talked about establishing the content of the course, or running the courses, but just in setting them up and establishing collaborations, it's quite good. I'm done.
Well, I think the technology has been instrumental, though, in establishing the network we have all over the world. And if I had to travel to every country to meet with these people or exchange even letters, I don't see how we could be doing what we're doing on the level that we're doing it, having,
Yes.
I think 12 courses now in 9 countries.
I will say, and it might be because of my age, I find person-to-person contact absolutely the best and irreplaceable. But it's not always possible. But I wonder, and again, one of the things I've learned, getting older, there are a few good things about it, is your perspective changes, and what you thought was sacrosanct or the only way to do things changes. So maybe in 20 years when video, when I think you can do it now, hold up my iPhone, the new iPhone's going to have a camera that goes this way, and I can talk to somebody on my iPhone and see them, stuff that was science fiction when I was a kid. I mean, maybe that will become, people will be used to it, and they won't have the expectation of face-to-face or the need of it. But I still don't, it's like when I'm away and I talk to my kids or my wife, the telephone is better than nothing. Skype is better than the telephone. Definitely better than the telephone. And especially with little kids, because the visual is really good. But it's not the same. It's not good enough if you really miss somebody. But it's better than it was before.
I remember showing you how a webcam worked
Right.
for the first time.
Are any of these interactions, this is for all 4 panelists, are any of the interactions archived in any way so that a high school teacher like myself, and we actually teach a bioethics course at the Field School of Science and Medicine across the street there. So if they could access that information somehow.
Well, what particular kind of information? Like the blogs of the students, for instance?
The blogs I think should be available, but I was thinking more of your lectures or some of the interactions that you might have had, video interactions or some of the pictures you may have taken at the slums of India or what you might have experienced in Cuba.
Yeah, well, it's a very good point. I think, at least from our department's point of view, we have never thought of having an archive of videos or lectures that we could make available to other people. I've never thought of it.
Well, I know that they are archived. So, I mean, if
So we
Media
could.
Vision has them, and so we could ask for them. And in the past, when someone was sick or a course, the recording didn't work or something, we always had a previous year where we could have the students watch it. It wasn't exactly the same, but it's still an option for them. And so they are available. And now the appropriateness of it, or if we knew ahead of time that there was a high school student classroom, that we can actually tailor that, or we could do some pre and post work
Right.
with the class.
Right.
Like, we are more than willing to do
In
that.
other words, let's say we have 45 videos of lectures in our archive, and they have names. I don't think it would be ideal for you guys to sort of look at them and watch them and figure out what was good, but maybe to say what you're interested in, then meet with us, either electronically or in person. But since you're right around the corner, you could do it in person. You know, one of your faculty took our master's course this last year, sat in on our master's course. So, I mean, we could do that.
He's probably the one who's teaching that.
Yeah, he is. And so, yeah, we would love to, you know, if we thought about it, we could say, okay, well, here's what we have. What would you be interested in? And then I don't think there's any proprietary thing about this stuff, is there? Does Case own it? And
Well, no, because any class that we teach, we have that option to make all of our lectures open to the public. So I could say, I can limit the privacy of the lecture. So I'm teaching a class, I can say it's only enrolled students, or it's only people with a case ID, or it's open to the public. So there are ones that, and if I wanted to still keep it pretty private, I could ask for email addresses, and then they would have access from that email address to click into and then log on, and I would get you a password. So then you could look through the lectures and know which ones were good, or at least appropriate. But it is something that if there was a specific topic, or talking about poverty, and we can develop something with our experience in India, and then you could we can bring back pictures or the discussions that we have from the students.
Can I just follow up on this one real quick? I mean, one of the things that we could do that might be useful is now, is it Ron? I'm trying to think of what is the guy's taking the course.
Welsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welsh?
Yeah. If once he's taken the course, so for instance, the course he took is a 12-credit course where there are 2 lectures twice a week for 2 semesters. He probably knows which lectures he liked and would be useful for your students. Now, we don't videotape those, but we could selectively videotape, another example of my anachronistic way of thinking. But we could, whatever you call it now, and then have those specifically for that purpose. So I think the guiding the technology is the most useful thing, but we're definitely open to it.
So this is a question for any of you as well. What I've heard you talk about a lot is communication between case people, faculty and students. Very little about communication with the individuals in India or in other areas, and especially between you and them, or between students and them. And I have some follow-on things I want to know about specifically with that. But could you start by talking about communication with the international people?
This is something that, you know, today this has really kind of exploded in my mind because of some of the things I've seen here at CollabTech. But so when I put together this this lecture series that prepares them for the immersion experience, it's me, it's some of my colleagues, it's people that I've taken on trips in the past, and it's our version of a disease or an entity that has relevance to India. But I think that we obviously, then we go and we work with the people who deal with it every day. So my goal, or perhaps my dream, is to have them give the lectures, maybe over Skype, or maybe using this Adobe Connect, you know, maybe using some of those types of technologies, for them to give, at the very least, for us to have archived lectures from them, the people that we're going to be working with, prepare us for working with them. And even better, of course, interactive sessions with them before we go that allows my students to be better prepared for the experience, and it allows us to develop a relationship so that when they walk into that clinic for the first time, both parties are more invested in each other. You know, so this is definitely what I want to do, and Nicole and I have been talking about this, you know, for the past hour, chatting about this.
Not being disruptive at all. But,
right,
yeah.
paying full attention, but hiding this. I think definitely this is something that I want to do.
And I would just say that, again, as much as I still had to go down. I can't imagine coordinating this trip without having met these individuals and had Gopal had these relationships established already, because there is some trust that needs to be built and some details that you can just not do unless you're face-to-face to understand and establish that. And it takes time. So, and increments. So we started last summer, you started 5 years ago. But this year, because we probably won't get to the point where we could record or interact live with the professors down in India and the students here, we'll record maybe 1 or 2 lectures and bring that up and introduce that idea now, so that when we go down there, we'll have the capability to do that, and then ask them if they feel comfortable with that. So we might give some kind of a lecture to the students so that they see their face before and know who they are, so that when they come here, they have this established. It can also ensure that the faculty in India know that that information has been received by our students prior to them going down. Because sometimes I remember last year they asked, they're like, well, we didn't really know what knowledge they were coming with. But if they are part of that preparation, then they feel more secure in where they can go from there when they have the students in front of them, and make that very valuable.
I may not understand what I'm about to say, and that's okay.
Okay, again, you're
But on the theory that when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, I have a feeling that Blackboard was used in place of a wiki.
for my
Yes.
documents.
Yes,
Can
and
you do me a
that,
favor and tell me I'm just revealing my ignorance. What's the difference between Blackboard and a wiki?
well, in the spirit of the original question I asked, Blackboard is likely to be closed to the case community. And people outside the case community probably can't get at the system that you used. That's my guess.
Yeah, and for the course development, this was partly for my education, and I was using, so that was an initial setup, and it was actually suggested to me by one of the librarians, but I haven't used a wiki yet with this.
Okay, but if you had a wiki, you could open it up to the international individuals and have faculty from the international institutions contribute as well.
So a wiki just gives you more options for involving people, whereas Blackboard is sort of you have to be within case, and even within case you need to have a password to get in. Is that?
Yes, and Blackboard is it's commercial software that's aimed at supporting academic courses. I think, would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
that's how I've used it, so.
Where a wiki is an open source public thing aimed at getting people to collaborate, and perhaps the best example of that, at least most well-known would be Wikipedia, which is an online, essentially encyclopedia that anyone can contribute to, and it's edited collectively, and the stuff that's in there is pretty good.
Can't wikis also can't you need access codes to get to some wikis?
You can.
So it could be an
Sorry about that.
intermediate thing. In other words, you could get anybody all over the world, but they'd have to have a code to get in.
Absolutely,
Okay.
you can do that.
So there's more flexibility with the wiki.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll just bounce off of that. You could also use case Google Apps,
Yes.
Google Docs.
Yep.
And you could use that in a more open way?
Oh, you can do open or control. Same as a wiki.
It's same
Okay.
password protected, and then give it out to who you want.
Then you're I'm sorry.
I just want to go back to the wiki issue, because I have 2 projects going on for the past 5 years, both of which we're going to start a wiki about, this summer, I hope. I finally have buy-in from my handlers that we can do that. But I think that for the India program, that's one of the programs. Not only can we open it up to our international, but I really feel like for a program like this, the students and residents, have a lot that they can contribute to the wiki. And I just wanted to throw that in there, because we think about it on the faculty level, but these guys are end users, and some of them now are advanced to the point that they're coming back as faculty into the course and so that allows me to take more groups. But I think that more brains we have working on it, and I think a wiki is a perfect way to kind of accumulate and then improve on that knowledge.
And on the international end of it, in India in particular, it doesn't require, this video equipment or high
Right.
internet bandwidth or
Right.
anything like that. It can be used, I think, or accessed much more easily. The other thing, you mentioned that just because it was fun, you didn't necessarily feel you could incorporate it in what you're doing. So this may fall more into that category, but I'm listening to your descriptions and the pictures and how you're integrating all of this. And Apple, and I'm not an Apple user, but Apple had a really cool thing with, I think, the current version of iPhoto and cameras that had geocoding in them, so that when you were done, you could get a map that showed you where each of your pictures were taken.
Wow.
And incorporating that into your blogs might be a really cool thing to do.
Well, yeah, I'm very excited because we were going to upload the pictures to the blog anyway, but now I forgot about the geocoding. And I have just switched to an Apple a month ago, so I'm not utilizing it to its potential at all.
Well, it would also surprise me if Google Maps didn't have a similar capability. I haven't hunted for it, but
So, some of the
What does?
cameras,
Android, okay.
some of the new cameras have embedded GPSs that actually will put the metadata
That's what
directly on the
geocoding
pages.
is.
Yeah.
That's what geocoding is.
Excellent. Well, we need to do this.
So do the cameras that take the photographs
They give you
have a
latitude and
GPS, they, not just the date and the time, but the longitude and oh my God.
Exactly, and then they take the pictures and locate your pictures
Oh
on the
my
map.
God. So again, just out of curiosity, if you buy a modern, very good digital camera, will it,
I would ask. I never trust any.
but sometimes, in other words, many of them have that capability.
Yeah, and they're standard, but you never know.
If you look for the word geocoding on the camera, or on the literature for the camera, that's what you need. And they're not expensive.
Yeah.
I have an application on my iPhone that if I go drive, bike, hike, walk, anywhere in like wherever I am, it will keep track of where I am, take waypoints, and if say I'm walking through the woods and I see a nice waterfall, I can take a picture of it with the phone and post the picture on this site. It's called Trail Guru, and it will give you the time of day, where it was, the geographic location, and how fast I was walking or riding or whatever. So there's all sorts of
This
cool
stuff is,
So it
See.
sounds like that because, much of the activities that I do are restricted to one city. But it sounds like even within a city, there's enough of a resolution that you can.
Oh, absolutely
You
there
can
is.
go down to the street level.
You can make it small, you can make it large, it doesn't matter. You can see, like, I live over on the near west side, so when I walk a certain area, I can look at Cleveland, and I see this little green line, with little red waypoints.
And yet, when
Or I can zoom down to the neighborhood level, and I can see the streets that I walk down by name. So I'm sure that Google Maps
yeah, I'm
in the
curious
world
because
thing has
we-
something like that, and I can apply a photo over it too.
Yeah.
So I can look at a picture of where I walked, and the little line shows you where you walked.
Yeah. No, I had my GPS with me on my phone last year, and a lot of times it just didn't register where we were in Hyderabad. So I don't know if it's to the same degree, but
But presumably every year it'll probably improve.
improve.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. There's the future. Sorry.
so there are some obviously technologically sophisticated people here. One of the problems that I've had is, and you've just become so damn dependent on these things. My wife uses the term addicted. But when I'm I was just in Europe, and it's prohibitively expensive to walk around and download things over the internet. It's very,
Really expensive.
yeah, like really, really expensive. Is that going to change? Do you see that changing?
It's only really expensive because you're still using your American provider. If you wound up getting a European SIM card for your phone and plugging it in, it would be reasonable.
It'd actually be cheaper than it is here.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say about your problem with your GPS. If you get a SIM card from India and then you might be able to get the GPS.
Can you put those in iPhones?
You can.
This is like a how-to.
This is like we're consulting you about,
I actually think you can, because somebody from Israel who had an Israeli iPhone that they used with Orange was here and was using it with AT&T here, or T-Mobile, either one.
Yeah, because Europe is way, way ahead of us in terms of the 3G technology and phone technology. Middle East, Japan, they do things with their phones that we haven't even thought about yet. And it just happens like that, and it's considered the norm. It's not like something special, it just happens.
So if you want one for fun,
Yes.
there is something called Sea Dragon. Do you know about that?
I don't think so.
It is a project that, actually, it's a company that Microsoft bought. And you know about TED Talks, TED?
Yes.
If you go to the TED Talks and you Google, or you search for Sea Dragon, there's a gentleman, nice-looking gentleman with a beard. His last name is something like Grula or something like that. He has a great talk on it, and it actually stitches pictures that individuals have taken that don't even know each other together into making a scene in what's going on. And I mean, he did some stuff around Notre Dame that was mind-blowing, but it's much more than that. And I think that that's probably in the fun category for what you're doing, but it's not all that far in the future.
But even as a project when we come back, to say, send over any pictures that you have taken and I'll compile them, and then to have that be the activity so that it is a reflection of what this means. And when you look at these pictures and you tell a story to your family and friends, or you go back to your own university, what does this tell you? Like, what is the message that you take home? So I think just because it's fun, actually that's a huge selling point as an educational tool. I'm a very big proponent of education should be fun or you shouldn't be doing it. So I will have to look that up.
Yeah, fun tends to sneak some learning in.
I know. These courses, I have to admit, one of the best aspects of these courses is that you don't have to fight to grab anyone's attention. It's right in front of them. They can't help but learn. They can't help but experience. And I can't help but learn each time I go down or go to a different trip.
But isn't
very
that a function of how different the place you're going to is? In other words, if I go to Amsterdam, yes, but it's not like if I went to India where I know nothing, and then almost anything I see, I'm learning or hear. Whereas if you go the more it's like the United States, you'll learn some things. But going to India, if you're in, if there are people who aren't interested in learning anything, but I mean, you.
I don't know. I've never been to Amsterdam, so I would be very
Well,
excited.
it's nice, it's interesting, but it's not like every second you're smelling something you never smelled before and seen something.
Well, in Amsterdam, maybe.
Well, maybe in Amsterdam, right?
Any other questions?
I feel like we should see if we have any other questions.
I know.
Yeah, you guys have been great.
List. I don't understand.
So I have a question. How many people here are from Case? So it occurs to me, and maybe it's there and I don't know it. I mean, I love technology. I'm, compared to people my age, I'm pretty good at it, but compared to people who are really good at it, I'm an amateur. But it seems to me that a university like this ought to have a place where you could go and get consultation about these things. In other words, if I go to Europe, what should I do if I want to get a SIM card? Will it work with an iPhone? Should I buy another phone cheaply and put a SIM? What should you do? Those kinds of things where you go on the web and look, and well, for me it's harder. I read different things. I don't understand them. But I mean, like talking to you guys today, there are enough people around that you could have an office, especially for supporting the international programs, where you could go and they could say, well, here's the technology that you could use, and here's how to do it. What do you think?
I don't know if there is a place like that, but what we're told to do is recommend calling the help desk, and then they will direct to the appropriate office.
Well, like where you're here today, why don't you talk to Len or to Sarah or
Yeah,
to
okay.
the outside?
Okay.
Because that's a good suggestion. I mean, it would not be hard to cobble together a team.
Yeah.
to
I mean, they
address
might be overwhelmed, but
you-
still.
But you can also solve things sometimes by saying, gee, if there's a lot of interest in this particular application, or in international standards, or things like that, you could do a session for lots of people
Yes.
for that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
because it would be so efficient, because the questions I have, there must be zillions of people who have the same kind of questions at various levels.
Connection to
Website for
UH.
this?
Yeah.
How tight is my connection to UH?
Yeah, I mean, how, I don't know it very well,
Yeah.
but they have, and I know the clinic has it too, they have a department that deals with foreign doctors and visas and all that stuff. And usually they have a staff of people that know all those answers because they have to deal with both sides of the equation. Most of the time it's bringing
I don't have
physicians
enough
in
of,
from-
I don't have enough of a connection that they wouldn't charge me for it.
Okay.
Okay.
I was just gonna make a comment that those of you guys that are going to India, I mean, I would access the Indian IT people at the university, at the teaching hospital and the various universities. They have to know all this stuff.
That's the right suggestion. I was gonna go there also, because, they're local, they have to buy it, they don't have the resources necessarily that we do to do it. What do they buy?
And there's a lot of interaction between India and the United States with technology.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I know a little bit about Europe, but the countries, it's not true that all the countries in Europe are much more advanced than us. And some of them, like Spain, it's terrible, it's extremely expensive to use mobile phones and the internet. Whereas in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, it's much easier. So it really depends, it's country specific. And the Spanish complain about their level. And I think France is the worst. France is actually pretty bad.
It was kind of a generalization, but for
Yeah,
the most part,
yeah,
some of those
yeah,
other.
yeah, oh.
I mean, next week, Greece may not have telephones.
Hey, guess what? Guess what? I just got a flash that the stock market was down 1,000 points today, so we might not have them either.
You had a question?
Yeah, well, mine is more or less a comment and a question. I appreciate the international focus on bioethics, but can you tell me what kind of domestic program we have in place to deal with some of our domestic bioethic issues in our country? Is there
Well, you mean in a technological?
technological? Yeah.
Well, we have a department of bioethics. We do research, we write papers, we disseminate them. What else do we do? Do we anything specifically electronically?
I guess it depends. So I have worked with high schools in the area, and I know that the Cleveland Clinic is doing their lecture series of in high schools if they wanted to work. I think your school is one of them.
Yeah, Clinical School of Science and Medicine, Stokes Boulevard has a bioethics class, and they do a lot of distance learning as well with the Cleveland Clinic and case specialists.
Yeah. So I think it's out there. It's just finding who would be interested and then tailoring it to those specific populations. But there's community outreach. I know that University Hospital, again in association with CASE, does a lot of community outreach, and some of it is technology learning and or utilizing technology to help advance learning.
I can tell you that kind of stuff is inspired the 10th grade for their school to actually spend 2 weeks doing service learning in various
Yeah.
hospitals, hospices, dealing with all kinds of issues, and they'll be creating public service announcements using some of this technology stuff in the blog.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you've been a
Thank
great
you, guys.
actively.
Yes, thank you very much.